Welcome on this day of Pentecost. This is the celebration of the beginning of our church. This is where we start to become not just followers, but people who create something new. This week I was downtown. We in the city I live, there's a large section that has a great market. It basically runs all week long, and it's especially heavier in the weekend. So often, when we look at the story of Pentecost, I like to tell it from the perspective of the people who were touched by the Spirit. But while I was in the market today, I was thinking, what was the perspective of those who were in the marketplace then, 2,000 years ago? What would have been the people who had come from all of those nations, who were there for a feast? It was one of the three holy feasts of the Hebrew year. They'd come from everywhere, speaking all of these languages. I was thinking about that as I was walking through the market and hearing French and Hindi and Mandarin and Spanish and all sorts of other languages all coming together. We would not be able to understand each other if we didn't have a base language of in this country, either French or English. We wouldn't necessarily understand each other. So imagine being beside people whose language sounded barbarian in the literal meaning of the word. A little bit of history lesson. The reason Romans identified Germanic tribes as barbarian is because they didn't understand the language. They thought they were saying barbar, and that became barbarian. So it was all about essentially the snobbishness of the Roman people to not put an effort into understanding the language of their neighbors. So if we're not in a crowd and we don't understand the language, how are we going to be able to communicate? What must it have been to be in that place where suddenly you are seeing people be able to make that connection? We can look at this story as a very literal happening, which is wonderful and fabulous. Or we can look at it simply as a metaphor for the power and the energy moving through people when there's a connection there, when there's the Spirit is very much free to be among us and felt by everybody there. How do we communicate? How do we cross those barriers? What must it have been like to suddenly realize I understand the people who just minutes before I could not communicate with, I couldn't connect with? That's the power of our faith. One of the things that I love about Christianity, I mean, aside the fact that it's what I'm born into, it's what I believe, it structures my life, it makes the universe make sense for me. But one of the beauties of Christianity is no matter where you are in the world, it looks the same and it looks different. I look at my Jewish siblings and Hebrew siblings or Islamic siblings, Muslim siblings, and Buddhist siblings and everybody else, and we have fantastic interreligious conversations. But their traditions look pretty well the same wherever they go. And this isn't just about domination, because in the early years, before colonialism really got a good hook, people were adapting and making it look different as well. Our religion, our faith, is not about the structure. It is not about how we say our prayers or when we say our prayers or how we get together or what order things are in. Those are just conveniences. Those just kind of make sure we get everything done that we say we're going to do. Our faith is in this identifying this energy, this movement around us, this recognizing that the God in human form is no longer with us, but God in spirit form is everywhere. And it's that form that is transformative. It is that sense that everybody can tap into. So when we start praising people, when we start to have conversion experiences, for want of a better term, we start to take what we know, add it to what we're learning or think we're learning or perceiving, and it becomes something new. No matter where you are in the world, Christianity is the same and it's different. That must have been the feeling of those people so long ago on that Pentecost morn, coming there out of obligation, coming there as people of faith, as people who are really respectful of their culture, who recognizes this was part of their calling, that they were to show up and do the thing, being graced with something more. And I really want to stress the fact that it's more, it's not a replacement. Our tradition follows seamlessly from the Hebrew tradition that Jesus lived. There's no break. There's no place in our traditions where Judaism got all of the Hebrew stuff and Christianity started fresh and new. That didn't happen. We celebrate our birth on Pentecost, not because there was nothing there before, but because we became something new as we understood something older and something deeper, something wiser. It was new. That energy to change the world, to recognize ourselves as part of something so much bigger that included everybody, not just the people who identified as us, but everybody in the countries around us. The names that we see in the scriptures, well, they're just the local names that for the most part have fallen away to history. We don't recognize so many of them anymore. In fact, the Hebrew culture is the oldest continual, still practicing tradition in the world, save maybe the Chinese, but that's a whole other conversation to happen. Out of the Mediterranean, for sure, it's the Hebrew people. But all of these other nations were there. Hebrew converts, Hebrew born and raised, we call them cradle Hebrews, all of them there to have a celebration of the voice of freedom. And here we have a new kind of freedom coming through the people, something that everybody could tap into. This is not selective anymore. This is not about Jesus, God in human form, going around the countryside and calling certain people and being there physically, so that if you happen to be in the town and available and had the time to, or the strength to even go wherever Jesus went, to be able to be part of that community. This was for everybody. It didn't matter where you are, what your limitations, what your availability was. This was God being able to be felt and touched by everyone. There's a reason we look at this day as transformative. There's a reason why we dress in red and have parties and do different things to celebrate Pentecost, because this is a time of something new. And it's a time of completion, really. The whole Lenten, Easter, Pentecost cycle, that's a third of our year. We have come through the heaviest point of our Christian tradition, and now we are starting to build in lightness again, in joy again, in possibility again. We're not crowded, we're not cowed, we're not fearful of what could happen. Those days are gone. Now it's all about possibility and the energy that we have as God has swept through all of us. The people that day in the marketplace in Jerusalem, they felt something. They couldn't identify it, and of course those who were naysayers wanted to immediately suggest that the people were drunk. It was an easy excuse. It was an easy way to dismiss what was happening. Peter finally got the nerve to actually stand in public and said, no, that's not it at all. But the people tried to understand in that vast audience of confusion, where they felt something they did not know, and they saw something in a group of people that did not make sense to them, described as flames flying out of them, talking in languages that were recognized by everybody around. The people wanted to understand what was happening. They wanted to control what was happening. They wanted to put it into a form that was easily understood, that had nothing to do with the claims of those talking about the Holy Spirit. It's a human condition. Even those of us in the church get caught up in it. When we see moments where the Spirit is very obviously active, People in my job very quickly dismiss it as it can't be what we think it's going to be. It can't be a miracle. It can't be the Spirit moving. We have to look at this logically and kind of drill down to what it could possibly be so we can get our limited human imaginations around it. Pentecost pushes us to do something different. It asks us to get out of our own selves, to see something whole and possible. It gives us a glimpse of what is to come, what the promise looks like, that everybody is on equal footing, that everybody understands the message clearly, that everybody is allowed to feel this energy, that everybody is welcome to participate. And none of us are controlling where that energy goes. All we can do is go for that ride and follow through and feel what God has wanted us to do. Jesus taught us the words. God incarnate showed us how to live. God is spirit, gives us that extra push, that extra energy, that extra sense of purpose to be able to get involved ourselves. It's a profound day for our church as we recognize now here, all of us, we have our calling. We can hear each other, communicate with each other, share that vision freely without barriers of culture or of creed or of anything else in the way. We are one in the Spirit. We can feel what it means. I really hope today you have a moment where you just feel like flames are bursting out of your head, where you can touch what the Spirit is doing in you, because I promise it's doing a lot. And you might not recognize it in yourself, but I promise you, if you talk about it to someone else, they will see it in you. That is part of our promise. The Spirit is for everyone, flying around, bringing us closer to understand how we are part of making God's world a reality.